If you've thought about relocating to or buying a second home in beautiful Napa Valley, California, you're going to want to hear this. I just sat down with a fantastic professional who specializes in the Napa Valley, giving us all the ins and outs about real estate, information, areas, even how to get in for wine tasting. Plus, you're going to want to hear about the golden ticket of Napa Valley real estate. Let's go.
So that's what I wanted to talk about today is kind of give me an idea. Number one, what's the market like today, right now, kind of what's going on, and certainly kind of what do you see people are considering relocating to Napa and considering second homes?
Yeah, so Napa Valley in general is known for our second home market. It's a destination location, a worldwide destination location, not just specifically here to the Bay Area because it's easy. It's a escape, it's a getaway, but it's something that's recognizable and easy to obtain or, travel to on the weekends. Napa is kind of an odd market in that there are micro markets within the valley.
Mhm.
And so it's almost like an hourglass is the best way to describe it. So it's capped on each end with some normal average and median sale prices. And when I say normal, that's anywhere between $600 and $750 a square foot. And then as you kind of zone into the center of the valley, so Yountville or St. Helena, those are where you're seeing the highest prices. And those can trade anywhere from $1,000 a square foot to $1,300 a square foot. The center of the valley seems to have the most activity when it comes to second home changeover and buyer pools. Yountville being definitely one of those micro markets. But with Yountville, there's only about 4 homes that trade per month. So there's very
Wow.
little inventory. When something pops up that's really special, usually people are jumping on it regardless of market conditions. So it's kind of safe coded from what we might be seeing here in the market today or what could happen in the future. And then St. Helena in itself is known for their second home market.
Okay, that's great. And it seems like also it'd be very valuable if you're looking at properties and one is a property that has that short-term permit in place, right? Is that something that like is a golden ticket that people really love and look for?
It's a golden ticket and it demands an extreme premium on the property.
That's interesting because you probably wouldn't know that maybe looking online or looking at properties, right?
That's exactly it. So when you see a house that might be at 1.8 million when regularly it would trade at 1 million or 1.1 and they're like, wow, they're high in the sky, or they just don't know how to price property. Well, look at the intricacies and some of the
Right.
notes of the description on the property because there might be a short-term rental permit attached to that property. And it's really important to know is the short-term rental
Yeah.
market. And so with St. Helena, there's only 25 short-term home permits. So you have to have a permit in order to do a short-term rental. Short-term rentals are anything 30 days or less for the Airbnb type opportunities. Napa proper has 41 permits available for short-term rental, non-hosted, and then 60 hosted, and that's it. And so
Can you
everything
talk
else.
about what hosted and not hosted is?
Yeah, so non-hosted is kind of like your traditional Airbnb. So it's a vacant house until somebody wants to reside on it. They can access via PIN code, have the whole property to themselves for the weekend or the week or however long they're renting for.
Okay.
Hosted means that somebody is physically living on property and they're allowed to rent out up to 2 bedrooms out of that property short term. So a night, a weekend, a week, anything under 30 days.
I would guess all of those spots are taken. Is there a waiting list? What does that look like? Do you know?
Yeah, there's a huge waiting list. So we don't even promise our clients anymore that, oh, hey, buy this property, get on the waiting list and really cross your fingers. And maybe in a year or two, you might have a vacation rental permit for your property. It's just not realistic because not only do you have to wait for the permit to become available and they do transfer with sale. So it's very rare that one will come available to the open market. The property has to qualify with specific regulations. So it has to have certain amenities, certain parking components to it, certain areas and location close to restaurants and wine tasting rooms. And what's funky about that is that we have no idea what those specific regulations are with the city. And so
Wow.
it's not a known factor and it can change day by day. And so the property has to be something pretty spectacular, I think, in order to qualify. Napa being a worldwide destination, what's interesting is that a lot of our clients are picking up property with the intention to rent out. And what we've experienced is that there still aren't any short supply of renters wanting to rent in the 30 to 60 day time frame. So they're still obtaining those premiums on those rents. And they're still considered short term because it's not a 6 month or a 12-month lease time. But people love to travel here for the summer. or people love to travel here for harvest, or a lot of the events that are held up here, like the Mustard Festival and Bottle Rock and all of that, where they'll just buy out a property for 31 days in order to obtain, something shorter term.
Are there like better times to buy in Napa Valley? What's your market like in terms of you want to like try to time the market, A, to see the most number of properties, or B, kind of the lowest price time in any given year?
In Napa, we do have our market. So fall and spring are typically our strongest time and where we see the most trading happening with properties. And a lot of it has to do with how properties show, but also because of the agriculture here in Napa. And so if people are buying property with vines, it's best in the fall market to be able to test that fruit or that vine in order to get the best results on your test and see, actually what you're purchasing and how it's producing, how it's affecting agriculture on the property. We see a lot of vineyards that trade, or properties with vineyards trade anywhere between August and October.
And what's the maintenance like on that? Because if it's your second home, you're coming up once in a while and you're thinking like, I'm not a farmer, what's the kind of maintenance like that? Can you hire someone to do it? Is it something a gardener can do? What's that like?
Yeah, so what's really great about little hobby vineyards is you can make it what you want. So you can have a full service for that hobby vineyard, crush, produce the grapes and bottle, have it all encompassing and just pay somebody to do that. Or you can be as involved in picking the grapes and having them watered and, all of that, and be super hands-on, or anywhere in between. We have the contacts that we can give to those buyers.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, I'm pausing just for a second to give you a moment to hit like and subscribe down below to make sure you get all my future content.
Well, you touched on communities a little bit, obviously Napa proper, Yountville, some of the kind of big names people might be familiar with, but can you give me a little insight on communities, maybe lesser known communities, maybe kind of places where you think there's a little bit more bang for your buck?
Yeah, so I mean, there's many regions, many different little cities and towns throughout the valley. And then an added layer are the AVA, the agriculture, viticulture areas. And so those are very prestigious in some and not so prestigious in others. And so it really depends on the purpose of what you're buying the property for. So it starts everywhere south in the valley, which is American Canyon, which is kind of the gateway to the valley, is what they call it. And that's the most affordable area, I would say. It's where a lot of the tract housing is, a lot of where the workers and the normal residents tend to buy, especially for entry-level properties, not so much
Okay.
for second homes. Once you start to go past American Canyon, you enter Napa proper, or the city of Napa. And that is really, really up and coming. It hasn't really been on the map, but now that restaurateurs and wine tasting rooms and all of the wineries, because people don't want to drive out to the hillsides anymore, specifically because of fires and all how it looks now on the hillside. So
Right.
they're really investing in the infrastructure here in the city of Napa in order to give that experience without having to drive a far distance. And so the downtown area is really popping. The resale value that and the increase on value and property that we've seen in the downtown area has been huge. It's a really big second home market now, something that's really close to town, close to Main Street, close to all the amenities. And what's really great about Napa is there's some really charming properties, because a lot of them were built in the late 1800s to the
Yeah.
early 1800s and have been refurbished. And so it has a lot of character and charm.
Got it.
As you head north from Napa proper, you start to get into what you normally see on TV and commercials and what you experience when you come to vacation here for the Napa Valley. And it's a lot more land. And so you're seeing more of the bigger estate homes with selective high-end neighborhoods. And so the first area that you'll hit is Yountville. And Yountville is known for the French Laundry, which had won Best Restaurant in the World 2 years in a row. You have a ton of Michelin star restaurants there, a bunch of little boutique wineries, really cute and quaint town. But that is definitely, I'd say, half of the residents in Yountville are second homeowners. And so it's a great central location in the valley to purchase a second home.
That's
And
great.
as you towards St. Helena, you have that Main Street component to it, a lot of charm in that you have these normal residential properties that have been made into mini estates. And so you have, like this 2,000 square foot house on a normal residential lot, but it's like all the bells and whistles, the most beautiful properties that you've ever seen. And they're going for anywhere between 3 and 5 million. That's definitely catered to the wealthy, the affluent. And then Calistoga is kind of my favorite, even though it's 45 minutes north of Napa proper, because it's a little bit more rustic. We're starting to see bigger developers develop, like the Four Seasons. Auberge has a few properties up towards Calistoga. And so you're seeing more of the affluent clientele that are heading that way, but it still has a really cool hometown feel, really rustic, redwood. You see a lot of metal and barns and all of that. And it's just what I picture as indicative of Napa Valley.
And when people are commuting into their second home, where are they flying into? How are people getting to and from Napa?
Yeah, so a lot of our second homeowners live in the Bay Area, but those who are traveling in, we're noticing that they spend a little bit of time in the city first. So they're flying into San Francisco, Oakland, possibly San Jose, and spending time at a property that they may already have in the Bay Area. And then they'll drive up to finish their stay up in the valley. But those that are just coming up from the weekend, LA, New York, Miami, Chicago, we're seeing those buyers fly in privately. And we do have an airport here in Napa. So it's the Napa County Airport. I mean, that's about a 5-minute drive from downtown Napa.
Obviously, you guys have experienced devastating fires recently in the past few years. How has that impacted fire insurance, and what should people be thinking of if they're considering property?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I don't know if you guys have been notified about some of the state safety fire regulations that are coming down the road. It might not affect you in Silicon Valley as it's going to affect us, but it's specifically to dead end roads and developing property on those dead end roads, which is devastating to the valley, because if you think of how the valley is designed, is you have the valley floor and then you have all of these roads that go up the mountainsides that end. And so if you can't build past 800 feet or 1200 feet from the intersection of a dead end road, that means anything a mile past you can't build on, which means more hillside properties on dead end roads. And right now we still have 900 homes that we lost in the fire that still have not been rebuilt, that are on those dead end roads. And so if they don't have a permit by January 1st, they will not be able to build on their property.
Oh my goodness.
And so that's one huge thing that's coming down the road here in just a couple of months, that we have some concern about how it's going to be regulated and all of this from a state level. And so that's something that definitely you're going to want to take into consideration when coming to the valley and looking for property. Because a lot of our second home buyers, because our inventory is so short, some of them are deciding to build. And so with the building process, you don't want to buy a piece of land that you're not going to be able to build on in 2 or 3 months. So always use somebody local here that knows what those regulations are and where those parcels are located. As far as fire insurance, we're still dealing. It's a big thing here. If they're in the high severity zones, which a lot of the hillside properties are, some areas on the valley floor are considered high fire risk as well. We have trouble getting those properties insured. Some insurance providers will not insure at all. Some will have to obtain high risk fire insurance policies, which have big premiums, big annual expenses attached to them. But the majority of the city of Napa and most of the towns we've been okay on. State Farm is one of the biggest insurance providers here that have reasonable quotes when it comes to high severity fire zones. And so we're still able to get deals done. It's just a little bit more expensive, but we think that being the deal of the Bay Area here in Napa, when our average sales price for Napa proper is 900,000 and up in St. Helena is 1.8, that's probably a screaming deal to what you guys are selling down in San Francisco. So there's kind of a balance between, okay, yes, you're going to have to spend a little bit more on fire insurance and homeowners insurance, but you're getting a deal on the property.
And then I know you kind of focus on Napa, maybe proper in the city, but as you get further out, are there other things that, if you're coming from a more suburban location, you might not be as familiar with, are there septic tanks? Are there systems like that people should be familiar with? That those kind of things always scare people a little bit, I find. So what could people know about that, and kind of, again, general maintenance on properties in Napa or surrounding areas?
Yeah, I think that it sounds a little bit scarier than what it actually is. When you get out to the country property, it's actually very easy to maintain. So if you have a well and a septic system, I think of that as a bonus, because if you have a really good producing well, that's free water forevermore, which is really great because you're tapping into the aquifers and the groundwater. With septic systems, if you have an engineered septic system, those can last 50, 60, 70 years. So beyond your lifetime or the lifetime that any person will probably hold the property. And so you just have to have regular maintenance of, every maybe year or two, just have the septic company come out to empty out the tank and such. I mean, it's like a $400 fee, and you can have that set up on an annual basis or biannual basis where you don't have to think about it. Thing with propane tanks. And so to have gas on property, you can automatically have them come out to refill, and they actually have gauges on the tanks, which alerts the company when you get low, and they'll come out automatically without you even knowing. And so once the The difficult part is getting it all set up in the beginning when you're a homeowner for the first time on country property. But once you have everything set up, it's easy as cake. Probably easier than city services.
Well, as a local, what are some things we might not realize if we're not as familiar, or we've only visited Napa as a tourist? What are your favorite hot spots, restaurants, locations? What would you recommend to an outsider?
So I am a steak person, and so I like steakhouses. And so my favorite steakhouse is Cole's Chop House, which is downtown Napa, right on the main strip. A traditional steakhouse with all you can, order sides and, all of that along with your piece of steak. And if you want something a little bit fancier, Press up in St. Helena is an amazing steakhouse as well. So those are my two favorite restaurants that I frequent a lot. As far as wine, that's so hard because there's so many. I mean, there's 400-500 wineries.
Where can you get in for a tasting on short notice?
That's where it's getting getting harder, as time goes on, especially with COVID, because we're having staffing issues for restaurants and wineries right now. And so a lot of people have ventured off to something else and working from home. And just like what we're doing right now, I'm sitting in my backyard, you're sitting in your home. So that's why at least Josh and I, we're members of a handful of wineries. And so part of our service and being lifestyle experts in a way and providing a concierge service to our clients, we have the ability to pick up the phone and make favors happen for our clients. Or if you had somebody that you wanted to call and say, hey, I want to get somebody in that I've done a property with, or you yourself wanted to, we would just make a call. There are ways to do that, but just the average Joe calling up and saying, hey, we just want a general wine tasting, it could be a little bit difficult in peak times. And so people are getting savvy on going on the off seasons. And actually that's when you have some of the best experiences at wine tasting rooms is through those off seasons. So like November through February, when it's a little bit cooler, there's a little bit rain, the vines don't look as great, it's all sticks, but you're tasting really great wine. They'll pull out the special bottles and it'll just be less of a crowd. So they're focused more on you and the experience.
Well, that's awesome. I know I've learned so much just about Napa Valley with you, Ryan. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all the insight.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. Before you go, please hit like and subscribe down below so you can get future videos. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below.